I would have said that I was a put together person. I had some issues, but I didn't see those as anything other than normal. If emotions are sort of like a pendulum where you can feel really amazing on this side, you can feel really crappy on this side, my pendulum was stuck in the middle. It was kind of a messed up situation, and our marriage was in a really difficult space as well. Once we got to that point where we're going to get divorced, that's when we started talking about all the stuff that we hadn't talked about. The 5-MeO ceremony is like going into therapy with God, and that's changed my filter for everything.
This podcast is brought to you by Enfold, offering the world's most comprehensive 5-MeO DMT program. To learn more, visit enfold.org. That's enfold.org, or click on the link in the show notes.
Well, here we are recording our first podcast episode of the new year 2026, and I'm so pleased to be joined by our friend Stan, who is an entrepreneur living in Manitoba, Canada, also the husband of Sande, who is on a recent episode of our podcast. And yeah, Stan, thanks so much for being here and being our first guest of this new year.
Well, Happy New Year, Arthur, and thanks for having me. I appreciate the opportunity to share my story.
Yeah, it's our pleasure. Yeah. So, Stan, you have the somewhat unique distinction of being somebody who's joined us at Enfold 3 times now, once in 2023, 2024, and most recently in 2025. Could you tell us a little bit about how Enfold and 5-MeO DMT came onto your radar, how you were introduced to that world?
Yeah, in a roundabout way. I'm actually a member of Entrepreneurs Organization, and in November of 2021, we went on retreat to Whistler, and the group wanted to learn about mindfulness.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a friend from Vancouver named Ashley Ray who was in that meditation space, and she meditates with like the TEDx speakers and has this really cool business in the yoga accessory space. And I reached out to Ashley and I asked if she'd be around and she could teach us about mindfulness. And she was unfortunately traveling. And fortunately, she introduced me to Steve Rio as an alternative. And she said, he's this guy. He used to be in EO as well. He's now on an island, Bone Island. It's just off the coast of Vancouver. She's like, it's a really short ferry ride, and you could get there from Whistler in like an hour, hour and a half kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So she's like, I think he would be a really great person for you to talk to. And I reached out to Steve, and he told me a little bit about the stuff that he's done in terms of nature of work, and he could do a workshop on that in the morning. And then he suggested that maybe we do some breath work in the afternoon, and that it was an energizing exercise. And energizing is an understatement. I didn't know what it was about, but I thought it was something that you would do in the afternoon after eating lunch to help get past that afternoon lull. And instead, I had a breakthrough experience on the first try ever doing breath work. I went completely out of body. I experienced myself as a light orb, and I was visited by another light orb. And it was a very like peaceful, like feeling of like unconditional love that surrounded me. And to this day, I still believe that it was my grandmother who had passed within a year of that experience. And there was no words exchanged, but there was this like download that I received that she was okay. And that was, it was pretty cool. But I remember like coming back, and it like literally felt like my soul entered my body, and it like felt like a foot slipping into a shoe. And it just sort of like locked back into place. And everyone was kind of like, wow, that was like really intense. Like what was, and I'm going, what the fuck was that? Like, Steve's going, are you okay, Stan? I'm like, I'm blown away, right? Like, I have no idea what I just experienced. And so Steve was great. He said, it sounds like you hit the bullseye, which doesn't regularly happen on your first sort of experience. And he said, what we'll do is we'll have a time to connect next week, and we'll go over it, and we'll just sort of debrief when you're off retreat. And that was awesome. And in that conversation, I learned a little bit more about breath work and what happened there. And then I also was introduced to the other work that Steve was doing. And so he talked about the retreats that they were doing, the work that they were doing with 5-MeO in particular, and that was really interesting to me because I'd had this now real spiritual experience, and it seemed like that would be a way to take that to another level and to go deeper. At the same time, I was thinking about Sandy, who in the previous podcast you learned about
Mhm.
her struggles with PTSD, and I asked Steve, my wife is struggling with PTSD. Is this something that might be able to help her as well? And the initial evidence was very promising in that it was quite effective helping people with PTSD. So he shared that, and yeah, it just became something that for a couple of years I kept thinking about.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, so it wasn't until October of 23 that we actually did go,
Mhm.
but that was how I was introduced to it.
Yeah, got right into it. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
I
sort
I
of
love I
breath
love that
work.
we're coming in hot here, not wasting any time getting into the juicy details.
Yeah, you got to be careful with breath work. It's a gateway.
Yeah, it sounds simple, sounds innocent, but, yeah, it can take you places as you've touched on.
Yeah, and what's really cool is since you've done the podcast with Sandy, she's actually gone and become a certified breathwork
Mhm,
facilitator because she's like in love with breathwork. I mean, the
mhm,
work that we did with 5-MeO at Enfold, was really, really special. But the breathwork for Sandy really impacted her in a very similar way to how it's impacted me.
mhm. As you were learning and considering 5-MeO DMT, of course, you're thinking of how it might be able to help Sandy with her PTSD. What were you dealing with at that time that you thought, maybe this could be something that's good for me too?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. I've given a lot of thought to that, and the the real reality was that I was sort of chasing the tail of the dragon from the breathwork session that I had with Steve.
Mm,
And I was really looking for a heightened spiritual experience and to explore that spiritual experience that I had even further. Um, I was really sort of head in the sand with regards to all the other shit
mm,
in my life. So I was going there for a spiritual experience. I got a lot more than that.
mm,
Um, I I look at it now, and back then I would not have said that I had mental health issues. I would have said that I was a pretty put together person. I had some issues, but I didn't see those as anything other than just normal. And the reality is that when I look back on it now, um, the state that I was in terms of my mental health, it was in disrepair for sure.
mhm,
So I did have a diagnosable issue back then, but in general, I don't think there would have been like a diagnosed condition other than just I had so many walls and so much armor up
mhm,
that it really like one of the other guests that you had used the term emotional constipation.
mhm,
And I've just sort of described it as like if emotions are sort of like a pendulum where you can feel really amazing on this side, you can feel really crappy on this side. My pendulum was just kind of stuck in the middle,
mhm,
and it was hard to really feel much of anything. And I although I wouldn't say that I had mental health issues, I back then I was doing things like I Googled sociopath to try and figure out if I was a sociopath. And
mm,
and the answer I came back with was that I'm not a sociopath, but I'm definitely limited in terms of my emotional range.
right.
So there was a lot kind of going on in my life. One of those things that was diagnosable was bulimia. So I had grown to be about 260 pounds at some point. And in 2017, 2018, in my entrepreneurs organization monthly meeting, you do an update and you talk about sort of the top 5% of your life and the negative or in the positive and the negative side of your life that you normally don't talk about with others. And I think it was going to be like the third time that I was going to share that I was unhappy with my state of health, physical health.
Mhm,
And I decided I was going to change that update to I've decided that I'm committed to getting into better health.
Nice one.
And I did a really good job of that. So I went from 260 pounds down to about 190 pounds in about 6 months. And I did that in a good way. But I think one of the habits that I was in previous to that that led me to where I was this habit of emotional eating.
Hmm.
I would eat to celebrate. I would eat if I wasn't celebrating, these sorts of things. It was really a lot of emotional eating. And for the 6 months, I was able to curb that. But then as those sort of old habits started to come back online, I didn't want to return back to how I was looking. And so I would, after emotional eating episode, I would binge. And in around that same time, Sandy with her PTSD and her state of affairs and the state of our marriage, she was going sort of the opposite direction, and she was gaining the weight that I had lost, and I was sort of cheating to stay where I was at.
Hmm.
So it was kind of a messed up situation, and our marriage was in a really difficult space as well. I think that um, you know, with me not having dealt with a bunch of stuff from my past, uh, I I entered into pretty much my marriage, but also every relationship before that with women, with sort of the mantra that the person with the least amount to lose and the one that's most willing to walk away maintains sort of the control in the relationship.
Hmm.
And I think that that really stemmed from when I was younger. My mom and my dad divorced when I was about 5 years old, and and then my mom remarried when I was 6, and we moved away to Ottawa. And by the time I was 8, my biological dad wasn't in my life anymore,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
I was young, but I was old enough to have that connection with my dad.
Hmm.
And
Yeah, take your time, Stan.
it was really hard,
Hmm.
and I didn't feel I had anywhere to go to talk about it because my mom had remarried. My stepdad was a great guy, and I was calling him dad. And I didn't feel, even though I was probably wrong, but I was a little child, but I didn't feel like I could talk to anyone about it, how I was feeling.
Hmm.
I felt abandoned. And by about 8 is where I feel like a lot of things in my life shifted. Before, I remember I could just go after anything. When I first moved to Ontario, I was born in Calgary. Some of my first memories are on my grandfather's ranch.
Hmm.
I thought I was a cowboy. So I actually would go door to door selling cowboy lessons.
Wow.
And, my stepdad would come back from like all these trade shows he would attend. He'd bring back knickknacks and stuff, and I would go door to door selling it. By the time I was 8, that sort of disappeared
Hmm.
quite a bit. And then I dealt with a lot of like just, bullying and things like that through school. I had to fight a lot in order to protect myself.
Hmm.
Um, I remember also uh, my mom convincing me to ask a girl out when I was like 11. And, I interpret it as like, oh my gosh, disgusting. I can't believe you would ask me. Like, I just felt so utterly rejected.
Nerve
And
wracking for an 11-year-old too. Yeah.
yeah, totally. And I was devastated by it. And, from my mom was really well meaning by asking me to do that. But that also like, like I didn't ask another girl out till I was like 18.
Hmm.
Like, I was just like this wreck when it came to relationships
Hmm.
because of, what happened. And it just not being addressed or worked through ever. So I think that a lot of the issues that I've been able to overcome now since going to Enfold go back to that sort of childhood um, issue, that core issue that I developed. And it's interesting because like I've done a lot of processing since Enfold, and it's improved my relationship with my stepdad, who eventually became my adoptive father when I was 12. So he adopted me officially when I was 12.
Hmm.
Um, I always sort of believed that he was a father to me out of obligation and out of guilt. And it didn't occur to me that it could be out of love.
Hmm.
It's really improved my relationship with my dad
Hmm.
because now I see through a different lens.
Hmm.
We don't have the perfect relationship, but it's a lot more satisfying of a relationship for
Hmm.
me
Hmm. Yeah.
because through the Enfold experience, I've found love for myself, and I now consider myself to be lovable,
Hmm.
and that's changed my filter for everything.
Hmm.
Like I know we haven't really got into my experience yet at Enfold,
Yeah.
but yeah, one of the big things that I think is fairly common is that it changes the way you look at the world.
Hmm.
The people that I've met through Enfold and who have, experienced 5-MeO, they all have a different filter,
Hmm.
which they look through their eyes and see the world.
Yeah. Different lens. Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, yeah. Thank you so much, Stan, for that really touching and honest share, kind of giving us the background on how you got to the way that you were. And it sounds like it makes perfect sense
yeah,
that through these childhood experiences, it sounds like essentially learn that it was safer to like keep things close to the chest and keep things stuffed down. And yeah, excited to
yeah,
hear like
yeah,
how the unfolding of opening back up has happened for you. And if you're open, Stan, yeah, would love to hear the story of what that first experience with 5-MeO DMT was like uh,
yeah,
in 2023. And you came
yeah.
at that time with Sandy?
With Sandy, yeah.
Mhm.
So I'll I'll start by saying that, you know, yeah, in around 2022, I think is where, as a result of my shit and Sandy's shit too, and I think our marriage was at a really rough spot, and we never fought in our marriage. We had been married about 11 years at that point, and we never fought. And the reason I think that we never fought is that when we were growing up, our parents had animated conflicts, and we didn't want to do that same thing. And like our they by animated conflicts, I'll say it wasn't like outright abuse and those sorts of things. It was just two human beings that hadn't sorted out their shit in conflict with one another, and things, just being animated. But we didn't want that. And so we didn't address anything that was really difficult in our marriage. And there was quite a few things that hadn't been addressed that got to a point where in 2022 we were going to get divorced. Um, and we ended up deciding let's try one more time. So once we got to that point where we're like we're going to get divorced, that's when we started talking about all the stuff, like some of the stuff, most of the stuff that we hadn't talked about, because we were already at rock bottom. So it was like we have nothing to lose. Let's just talk about these things. And then we realized, holy crap, like there's a chance for us here. But from 22 on until about October 23 when we went to Enfold, it was work. Like the marriage was felt like work,
Mhm.
and I don't think that either of us were convinced that this marriage was going to last a whole long time. And I think that one of the reasons why Sandy determined to come to Enfold was because she was doing it for me and for our marriage. Because like I've always had sort of like this growth mindset, I guess, and in many ways, I think it's just like it was growth for the sake of just ego driven growth,
Mm.
but Sandy wanted to like sort of join me on that path, and yeah, so we both decided to go together. We arrived at Enfold, um, and I mean, the first thing is that just what an incredible space it is to be there. You just immediately feel at home. And other guests of the podcast have said this, but like every little detail is so carefully taken care of.
Mm.
Yeah, so we were there originally for the 3-day format.
Mhm.
So, you're sort of like right into it in that 3-day format. So
Mhm.
it was like second day that we're heading into our ceremonies. And I remember like that day being a really great day because it's in noble silence,
Mhm.
which allows you to really go inward and reflect and to prepare for the ceremony that's to come. And I remember that day like just being this really good space, and I decide I'm going to go downstairs, and our room was just below the ceremony space, and Sandy was in her ceremony.
Mm.
And I thought I'll have a quick nap before I go up for my ceremony. And I could hear crying, and it was like some pretty intense crying happening up above. And I thought, oh my god, I need to get out of here because this is sort of hard to witness or to listen to. Um, and I just really hope that Sandy was okay. Uh, so I went back to the main house and just was doing some journaling and some reading. And then when Sandy came out of her ceremony, she was like so light
Mhm.
and peaceful. I hadn't seen that in her since we got married.
Mhm.
If you listen to Sandy's podcast, the catalyst for PTSD was a plane crash that happened days before our wedding.
Mhm.
So I always felt like I never really enjoyed the marriage with the same person that I had proposed to.
Right.
And it was like she was back.
Mm.
Yeah, it was really cool. It was, and we couldn't talk, but
Mm.
like it's really interesting because like one of the things that people get really scared about, I think, with regards to this medicine is just how intense it can be because it really provides an emotional release as much as it may provide like a mental or spiritual type release as well.
Mhm.
Um, so it was really interesting to have heard what I heard and then to see her when she was done.
Mhm.
But that gave me like this like sort of like, okay, what am I'm really now I'm looking forward to what I'm in for here. And um yeah, so we meet in the ceremony space, Steve and Austin, and we did the handshake dose, which sort of like just kind of came on for like seemed like just like a split second and then just sort of like disappeared. So like kind of like just like a teaser. Um and then that second dose that we did was a little bit more potent, and uh yeah, it was a beautiful experience. And I actually had this like feeling in around my like stomach region, uh, that I can only describe as like a body orgasm.
Mhm.
Like it was like this incredible like release in my stomach of all places. And I don't know why, but I came back from that just being like, "Oh my gosh, like it's all a manifestation and, like what we can manifest comes true." And like,
Mm.
I it was this weird sort of message that I got out of it. And I was so eager to go into the next dose. Because I'm like, I'd like that on steroids, please.
Yeah.
And
Oh, yeah.
yeah, so we suit up for that the the larger dose. And yeah, I did not experience that same effect. I actually believed that I had died. I believed that I had, sort of overdosed because I think I had no control over where I was. I felt like I was locked, like I was out of my body and I was locked somewhere else. And what started to happen is that started to really like it started off actually pretty beautiful in a way. Um all the shit and all the wonderful stuff that I'd experienced in my life like sort of like flashed before me. And I did have this realization that, oh my gosh, it's all beautiful,
Mm.
right? Like all of it's beautiful. It's incredible. Even the most challenging things that I have gone through um, have led me to a certain point in my life that is just beautiful. And then I've gone and taken a drug and killed myself and screwed it all up. And
Run away.
now I'm like flooded with this feeling of guilt and shame, especially around my marriage.
Mm.
And I was stuck there. And in my head, I was not going to be able to see my kids again or Sandy, and I wouldn't be able to make it right. And I think that that's probably like, I always imagine like what could hell look like? Fiery, like being tortured, all this stuff. Like, no, no. For me, I think it would be dying with a massive regret, maintaining consciousness, but not being able to go back
Mhm.
in order to make it right. So, what a great lesson.
Mhm.
Um, in my head, I determined that, and it felt like forever that I was locked in this place where it was just like this spiral of guilt and shame. But I did determine definitively that I would choose Sandy
Mm.
and I'd go all in
Mm.
if I ever had that chance to come back.
Mhm.
And it's weird because, like, one of the coolest things about the whole experience is like the soundtrack that Steve picks for your ceremony. And he does it like a DJ. Like, he's like reading you and choosing the
Yeah.
songs that come next. And I don't know what he observed in me, but there's a song that sort of sounds like, starts off by sounding like the gates of heaven have opened.
Mm.
And like when I finally made that decision in my heart, it was like, ah,
Wow.
and then I could come back out.
You're back. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm.
Um, yeah, which was incredible. Um, I felt like I had a second chance at life.
Mhm. Yeah, sounded like it sounds like
Yeah.
it showed you what you needed to see to, yeah, go back, make things right in your
Yeah.
your marriage and your life.
It's honestly what it was like. Like, the best way to describe it for me is that The 5-MeO ceremony is like going into therapy with God.
Mm,
And if you can imagine that God knows absolutely everything there is to know about you and is very wise and has like sort of this unorthodox, unique, tailored to you
mm,
therapy session that's waiting for you, right?
yeah.
Like it was completely unorthodox, but it was very loving and it was an incredible lesson and therapy session.
Yeah.
And I was just exhausted afterwards. So I had, maybe like I don't know, maybe a 15, 20-minute nap. And Stephen Austin just left me in the ceremony space because I was the last one that day.
Yeah.
And I went downstairs after that nap, and Sandy was sleeping in her room. And she woke up when I walked in, and like we kissed, and it
Mhm.
was like for the first time.
Yeah. I can only imagine. Wow. Yeah. Hmm. Beautiful, man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was able to share with Sandy my experience. And I was able to share with her, some of these stupid things that like just kept me from being fully in on the marriage.
Mhm.
It had been so long since we had kissed passionately, or done certain things. And I was hesitant to do those things because it had been so long that like she's going to wonder like what's
Mhm.
going on here. And so like we just didn't do those things. And I was able to tell her like how fucking stupid that felt now.
Mm,
It just didn't make sense anymore.
mhm,
And I wanted to do those things.
mhm.
And she wanted to do those things too.
What led both of you to coming back less than a year later in July of 24? Like, if you want to tell us a bit about how things transpired after that first experience and then what led you back, would love to hear that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, it brought Sandy and I a lot closer together. We started to do a lot more fun things together as well. Um, and being all in, I started to share things with Sandy that I hadn't shared with her before. And she was doing the same. And so we were getting like quite a bit closer. And I think for the first time, um, somewhere probably in around like December or January, uh, following that first retreat, I was I was feeling like I had just as much to lose as she did. I
Mm,
felt like I was totally in love and did not want to lose it.
mhm,
Um, and there were still some things that were sort of unresolved or that we hadn't really talked about from the marriage that had happened previously, um, or didn't happen previously that we would have liked to have happened, those sorts of things. Um, so it was difficult to talk about those things. But Stephen Austin, they recommended the book Wired for Love, and
mhm.
we both read it.
That's a good
And
one.
that sort of gave us a great little like kind of blueprint for how to like sort of safely get into radical transparency and those sorts of things. And so I think a big part of the integration was, taking that download that I got and then really taking action on it. Um, I think that you could go 2 ways. You could go into an Enfold experience, have an incredible week at Enfold, and there would be benefit to that that would be lasting for sure. But if you don't go back and do the work and integrate it,
Mhm,
then I think that you're only getting like maybe 10% of what the possible benefit is.
mhm,
And one of the things I really appreciate about Enfold is throughout that integration period, Steve and Austin, they made themselves available to us when we needed them,
mm.
right? And they made us feel welcome to reach out when we needed support.
Yeah, that's
So
important.
they were a big part of that, which was great. And then other things started coming up, I started to feel uncomfortable with hidden aspects of my life, especially when it related to like Sandy. And so one of the things that I felt like I really needed to share with her, because it was something that was still happening in my life and I wanted it to change, was the the fact that I was bulimic and that I was still eating emotionally and purging. So I shared that with her, and I was really hesitant because I thought, man, she's gonna fucking hate me for this. Because one of the issues that I shared with her was the fact that I was not physically attracted to her current state. But here I was cheating my way to looking like what I was looking like.
Mhm.
And I got nothing but love back from her.
Mhm.
Um, it's funny because like I find out afterwards that she had a therapy appointment with her doctor, and she was actually incredibly pissed off about it,
Mhm.
and rightfully so. Uh, but she didn't take it out on me. But all of these things like just really started to bring us a lot closer together. Not having these sort of secrets anymore, and I think for me, coming out of Enfold and also seeing that it's all beautiful changed a lot for me as well. So I started to look at challenges as opportunities.
Mm.
One of the things that I had heard in the past, I think it was Jim Rohn that said it, but like every adversity has with it a seed of equal or greater opportunity, and it all of a sudden made sense,
Mhm.
right? And so I could I could respond now instead of just react to
Mhm.
everything. Um, but what you know, and then we saw like a ton of improvement in my life, like just off of that first Enfold experience, and Sandy and I were just like, you know, could this get deeper? Could we go deeper with this medicine and even have further benefit? And that's what brought us to Enfold in July,
Mhm.
was just to kind of go deeper.
To
And we decided we would do it together, um, which was interesting, an interesting choice.
Mhm.
So yeah, it was again a 3-day format,
Mhm.
and um, and yeah, in the ceremony, the second time that we were there, I ended up going first, and
And Stan, when you say you decided to do it together, you mean that you would both be in ceremony as the other is ingesting 5-MeO?
exactly,
Gotcha.
exactly, yeah. So previously, we did the ceremony just with Stephen Austin, and then this time we would be present for one another's ceremonies.
Yeah, got it. Thank you.
And yeah, so I thought I would be super cool with Sandy being there. And I don't know if it was like, I think my ego was was like, no, you can't go in and have a full release ceremony with Sandy here for whatever reason.
Mm,
It it seemed like I needed to go to like max dose in order to actually drop in.
gotcha.
And so I did, and it was rather chaotic. And I remember not remembering a ton about it, having an idea though that it was very chaotic. And when I came back sort of out of it, like Steve kind of sat with me, and then Austin took Sandy outside and consoled Sandy.
Mm,
Uh, I'm going, that can't be good.
huh.
So I'm asking Steve, like, what happened? And he said, well, I think the words he used was a lot of youthful energy came out, which which basically meant that I had experienced almost like a maybe like a sexorcism or something like that.
Mm,
I don't know. Like it was a lot of like just crude like sexual things.
mm,
And even when I talked to Sandy afterwards, she's like, it didn't sound like it was you. It sounded like a different person
mhm.
saying these things. But like I think I propositioned Sandy, which is great. But then I also propositioned Austin, I believe, which is not so great. Um, so it was great though. Like Steve and Austin are two incredible people, in terms of like just staying in a place of non-judgment and not
Mhm.
taking anything personally.
Yeah, because yeah,
You're
in
like
that
you're
case,
really
yeah, it's
yeah,
not personal, right? Yeah.
Yeah, you're so safe
Mhm.
with them.
In something
And
like this, sorry to jump in, but I just wanna make sure that we don't miss it, like, I if you're open to speaking to it, like, this sexual energy that this youthful sexual energy that came out, is that something that, like, you could identify with that had maybe, informed or yeah, created, dysfunction in your life prior to that moment?
yeah, you know what? I think that, previously, um, I didn't understand uh the difference between like intimacy and sex. I
Mhm,
kind of saw sex as intimacy. Um and I saw sex with women almost like a sport,
mhm,
in a way. Like I think it was like my adult self trying to make my that 11-year-old boy feel better about being, you know,
right.
destroyed when he asked that girl out.
Yeah.
Prove to the world that, hey, you're not this disgusting loser that no girl wants
Mhm,
to to hang out with or have a relationship with. And then there was I also another thought that had come up in my head was, there's some sexual trauma in our family,
mm,
right? Um, and uh, and I thought potentially that some of what came out was generational as opposed to my own.
right.
Um, Today, when I think about it as almost like a death cry of who I used to be.
Wow.
You know, that's kind of how I look at it. Um, and and it was like as chaotic and crazy as it felt. Uh, like it was beneficial. Like it felt like something got out. And I was as much as I was like, "Holy smokes, what just happened? What did I just say?"
Mhm,
I at the same time, I felt lighter. And Steve and Austin, you know, Sandy and Austin came back in and they sat us at a table before I went and did another. I felt like I was like, I definitely need to do another dose. But they were great. And they said, okay, before we do that, let's just
that's
sort of digest what just happened. And
sure.
they're really good at just explaining that this is an energetic process and that,
Mhm,
the things that are coming out when you're in ceremony are you're not held responsible for those things,
absolutely.
right?
Yeah.
So that was great, and then the following ceremony was actually it was wonderful. It was very peaceful, and what it the message that I got from that one was just how much Sandy and I were destined to help people
Mm,
with our story and with what we'd experienced in sharing that with others,
mhm.
mainly with really close friends, and it's helped we've seen what it's done in terms of helping bring their relationships closer together. But also with, like, some of the people that I know in EO, we've shared our story, and again, like, just, an incredible amount of, benefit to others hearing our story, and we had so many people reach out to us just saying, like, "We really appreciate your vulnerability,
Yeah.
and I don't feel as alone as I used to feel."
Yeah.
And I really resonated with a lot of the things that you talked about. I think that, there's a lot of people struggle out there, and we view, those struggles and those stories as being weaknesses,
Mhm.
when in reality, I think that sharing them is a strength. Um,
Yeah, there's a saying, I think it comes from recovery or the, 12-step recovery, but it's something like,
yeah,
"You're only as sick as your secrets." And
totally.
in Austin, will sometimes say something similar. I've heard her say this in the past, and what is most personal is also most universal. So, yeah,
Yes.
people like you and Sandy and others who have been on the podcast, of course, open up and share these rather intimate details about what they've experienced and what life is like and has been like, hopefully invites others to do the same, and
Yeah.
we're not so,
And,
yeah.
like, one of the other things that I didn't cover, but I did after our first Enfold experiences, I was working with Steve on the doing coaching.
Hmm.
And in that process, I was able to share with Steve something that was deeply personal and that I had a lot of shame and guilt and confusion around from when I was a child. And I had determined I was going to bring that to my grave,
Mhm.
and possibly one of the most therapeutic and beneficial things I ever did was I finally found someone I felt comfortable sharing that with,
Yeah.
you know, and he just gave me this hug when and I thought like, well, if anyone heard that, they're just going to turn and run. And,
Yeah.
he just said, you don't have to carry that anymore alone. Like
Yeah.
it's, and that was so therapeutic to just like bring out something that you've never thought you could share with the open world. And since then I've shared it with a few people, and I shared that with Sandy, of course.
Mhm.
And it's so amazing to be able to share those things. And I think that like somehow 5-MeO gives you the ability to like go straight into difficult things somehow.
Mhm.
Um Back to that sort of like last dose though, I just want to assure people that um you're in a really safe space, like an incredibly safe space. And you know, I think that probably some of the most difficult things to imagine happening in ceremony have happened for me,
Mhm.
and it's been fine.
Yeah.
It's been just fine.
Yeah, thanks for naming that. And of course, yeah, it's the space that we do our best to cultivate is one of complete acceptance and non-judgment, and providing people an opportunity to let go of the things that they've been holding on to for potentially a long time. And like there's nothing that we're unprepared for. So we've got just a little bit more time here, but I want to make sure that we touch on your last and most recent visit in July 2025. So this would be your first time um, attending Enfold in the 5-day format. First time attending
Yeah.
without Sandy.
Yes.
Yeah. Can you tell us, yeah, how that experience was for you?
Yeah. Incredible. I I didn't I didn't know what to expect. And thinking I've already been here twice, like, is there gonna be benefit coming a third time?
Mhm.
I felt called to go, and I felt called to go on my own so that I could really just like sort of concentrate on myself. But after experiencing the 5-day format, I can see why you've moved to the 5-day format
Mm.
and stuck with it,
Mhm.
because it definitely feels like the right amount of time. So the 5-day was incredible. Um, I didn't know what I would feel about the initial meet the medicine ceremony,
This is a
because I had
first.
experienced 5 before. I didn't need to meet it,
Mhm.
right? So I'm kind of like, I'm thinking to myself, can I just do like a big dose
Yeah.
that night, and everyone else who hasn't done it before can do their handshake dose? Um, but I went super deep,
Mhm.
and I had an incredible, amazing experience in the meet the medicine ceremony.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah,
and
what came up for you, Stan? Like, what did you experience in that, if you recall?
um, I started to experience um, being like a baby. And I experienced two things as a baby. I experienced feeling alone and helpless and needing to be held, and like I wasn't being held. And then I felt what it's like when I was held
Mm.
and loved, yeah, that feeling like what it was like when I was held was just beautiful. And it was just a lot of gratitude came up, just a lot of gratitude in that meet the medicine ceremony.
Mm.
Um, the second day, that Sangha ceremony
Mhm.
was incredible. Probably, I'm a member of entrepreneurs organization, and we have forum groups, and we have all these different ways that we go deep.
Mhm.
But I would say that I've had some really incredible EO experiences, but this Sangha ceremony with the group, we went deeper than I've ever been with any other group
Mm.
before. It was incredible. I think that, at that point in time, I don't think there was a single aspect of my life that I hadn't shared with another human being. But what I felt was really incredible was to see there was 5 other people that had never experienced Enfold before. And of those 5 people, 4 of them shared things that they had expected they would always bring to the grave.
Mm-hmm.
And what was insane was just how incredibly well received it was by the entire group. And it was, and then, and people were able to just like really be vulnerable in a really unique way. Like I found it so interesting. I never wanted to leave that conversation.
Yeah.
Like it was just an incredible day.
Yeah. Yeah. Once you start
Um,
opening up in a group like that, it almost, there's such relief, and yeah, it can be something that you just want to keep doing with people once you get over that initial fear of doing so. Yeah.
yeah, like just let's just all be freaking real,
Do it.
it's crazy. Like, and it was super cool about Enfold 2 that I have to say is you get rid of all distraction. Like your phones are gone, right?
Mm.
You're there and you're present the entire time. And it feels like you're there for like an eternity and also in the blink of an eye.
Mm.
But you're like, it's just what strikes me is super cool is just you're there with a group of people that are just like totally present,
Mm-hmm.
right? Which is to me in this world that we live in today is a really unique experience.
Rare. Yeah.
And um, it's really been a great lesson for me in my life, and I really strive to be much more present because it feels amazing.
Mm.
And in that Sangha ceremony, it's heightened even further.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's just an incredible experience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Amazing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, Stan, yeah, we're just about at time here, but I don't want to let you go before hearing more about. We were chatting a little bit before we hit the record button here today about, yeah, how your experiences over the past few years, in part motivated or influenced by 5-MeO DMT and Enfold, have influenced or supported your connection with your Indigenous heritage and identity. Yeah,
Mm.
how can you say that that has changed for you over the past few years or so?
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. That's been a huge benefit. Uh, when I was like in my mid 20s, I was managing youth cultural programs department at an organization called Mumaway, and we had hundreds of kids that were going through our programs, and it was there were Indigenous youth, and we had a cultural component to sort of everything. And I was on a steering committee of Indigenous youth, and the facilitator we had brought in an elder by the name of Sequoia Trueblood, and in a short time that we visited together, he asked a few questions about me and those sorts of things, and then he ended up reaching into his bundle, which is just a bag of like sort of the sacred items that he carries with him for ceremonial purposes, and he pulled out um, this pine marten bag, and inside of it was his pipe stem. So this was his pipe bag, and he pulled his pipe stem out, and he said, I'm being told that this belongs to you.
Mm.
And he presented me with this pine marten pipe bag, and what was interesting is that I'd been given my clan by a Ojibwe elder as the Martin clan, so
Wow.
that was really interesting and fitting.
Uh-huh.
Um, Now, when someone gives you a pipe bag, it's generally not meant to be empty, and so he was essentially telling me that this was my time to become a pipe carrier,
Mm-hmm.
and I wasn't ready for it. And my mom was a pipe carrier, and I entrusted her with the bag to hold on to it for me for a point in time where I might be more prepared for it. And through the Enfold experience, and doing like breath work as part of integration and these sorts of things, I was all of a sudden, as a mid 40-year-old, 20 years later, having these visions of this pipe bag coming back to me, and then really vividly. And I thought, wow, I wonder if this is a sign that now's the right time.
Mm.
And so I started to think more about that, and it scared the shit out of me because, as you can see, I might be Métis and of Indigenous ancestry, but I'm very white,
Mm.
and so I've always been really self-conscious of that.
Mm.
And somehow now I feel so much more comfortable with who I am and with my truth,
Mm.
and so much better prepared to step into it
Mm.
that I just, I called my mom and I said, "Mom, I'm having these visions of this pipe bag, and do you still have the bag?"
Mm.
And what's really interesting is that in 2018, my mom's house burnt to the ground pretty much.
Mm.
They had to completely rebuild the house, and they walked away with one box of stuff. And she goes, "The one closet that had the pipe bag in it is the only closet that didn't have damage." And
Mm.
she said, "The pipe bag doesn't even have smoke damage."
Wow.
Yeah. So it's like, okay.
Something going on
Now,
there.
that first breathwork session, November 21, made me a little bit woo woo. And then all of a sudden now I'm like really woo woo.
Yeah.
So I got that pipe bag back, and that pipe bag um, is incredibly special to me. But as I said, like, it's not meant to be empty. So I started to desire to talk to some elders that I knew, or other pipe carriers that I knew, about the process. And there's one elder that I meet with. He's just a friend of mine, and we meet like every 3 months or so, and we talk a lot about business. And he's really into crypto
Mm.
and stuff like that. So he helps me understand, what crypto actually is and how it works and those sorts of things. And I thought I want to ask him about his pipe. So, we were in the morning that I was leaving to go have breakfast with him. I decided I'm going to ask him about his pipe. So I grabbed a tin of tobacco in order to pass to him, because that's the right way to ask for that kind of information from an elder, is you pass tobacco. And so I put that in my bag, and I get there for breakfast, and he's talking to the chief of his community, and he reaches across the table and hands me this beautiful pipe stem, and it's got this turtle on it, which is just beautiful on there. And turtles represent truth, and just like, this is a dope pipe stem. It's really nice.
Mm.
And he gets off the phone, and I said, "Guy, this is beautiful. Like, what's this about?" And he says, "Well," he goes, "when I left home," and he lives in Wikwemigon, which is on like Manitoulin Island.
Mm-hmm.
"When I left home to come to Winnipeg, which was 3 days previous," he goes, I was pulled into this room, and I have this bookcase, and this pipe stem's been in this bookcase for like 10 years. And I was told that this pipe stem belongs to you.
Hmm.
He used the same language that Sequoia used, right?
Yeah.
And he said, "And I was told also that you would have something for me today." And I'm like, "Well, I brought a tin of tobacco." And he's like, "That makes sense."
Hmm.
Right. And so that happened 3 days previous. And my decision was that morning,
Wow.
which is pretty cool.
Okay.
So it was neat. Like, he's like, "Well, that's how this works."
Yeah.
Right. Like, these decisions are made for us.
Yeah. All tied together. Yeah.
Yeah. And even how I got the pipe bowl and everything like that was just like a magical experience.
Yeah.
So just incredible. And a part of being a pipe carrier, there's sort of a rite of passage, which is to participate in fasting ceremonies, which are like 4-day dry fasts that
Mhm.
start with a sweat lodge and end with a sweat lodge ceremony.
Wow.
So like really intense.
Mhm.
So I've now done 3 of those, and I've got another 2 that I'm doing next year as well.
Mhm.
And I think that by slowing down for those entire 4 days in that fasting ceremony, and just really going deep internally, that it's really grounded
Mhm.
my integration,
Yeah.
and it's given me a lot of purpose and a lot of strength. So like, it's that today I live my life with far more purpose and presence. I'm responding instead of reacting. And yeah, I think that it all really like goes hand in hand. And, I was given the name Wolf Who Looks Both Ways. And the initial vision was of a lead wolf exiting the forest and
Right.
scanning the field to make sure that it was safe for the rest of the pack to come out.
Mm-hmm.
But I've actually found so much more meaning in that name because I do walk in two worlds as well as a Métis person,
Mm-hmm.
right? So I see that as wolf that walks in two worlds, and then there's also this concept of two-eyed seeing, which is something that's deeply meaningful to me, which is like when you talk with like true Indigenous elders, and you learn about the medicine wheel and stuff, like everybody brings gifts, right? And the Western world brought a lot of gifts here as well. And it's important to recognize those gifts.
Mm.
And but I do feel like this sort of business world that was brought in to North America when the settlers came, that it largely lacks spirit.
Mm-hmm.
It's about profits and quarters, where the Indigenous worldview is much more about connection and balance and looking generations ahead. And so one of the things that I've really got from this entire experience is a whole lot of purpose in the business that I'm running as an entrepreneur, to bring spirit to business and to sort of like act as an example of what that could look like.
Yeah.
Where you combine this Indigenous worldview with this worldview of the Western world, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's really grounded me as an entrepreneur. It's given me a lot of purpose, and I'm way more action oriented in my business today. And we've grown it like crazy. We've like tripled the size of the business since starting
Mm.
my Enfold experience.
Wow.
So it's been amazing in terms of the whole experience, like in all aspects of my life.
Mm-hmm.
It's been amazing. But I would say that it's like, there is some work to do, and it's scary sometimes to do that work. But there's so much reward on the other side of it. And, like my life's not perfect by any means, and I still have struggles, and I now can feel some of the more negative emotions much more acutely.
Yeah.
But it's also allowed me to be over here as well, which is just beautiful. And so, yeah, I would just encourage people, that if you are coming to Enfold, um, just to be prepared for it to be more than just a 1 week on Bowen Island.
Mm.
You know, it's going to be a journey, and it's a worthwhile and incredibly rewarding journey.
Yeah.
But I wish that I actually took more time on the back end of the retreats that I've attended to download.
Mm.
I've always had like sort of a tight schedule. So you go to Bowen and then you come like, in October 23, I think I was back from Bowen on the Sunday and on a plane to Vegas on the Tuesday.
Okay. Wow.
Of all places to go, right?
Doing it on hard mode. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I would suggest, if it's possible to like take a little bit of extra time to just digest what happened, because it's a big experience, and it's hard to sort of digest it if you're running 1,000,000 miles an hour.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a great piece of advice, and I think a great one to end on. But Stan, thanks so much for taking the time. And yeah, this has been like a beautiful, wide ranging conversation that I'm sure will touch many people in different ways. And so thank you for taking the time. And yeah, it'll be cool to have you just a couple episodes after Sande, so people can listen to the one and then hear the other side of the story.
I appreciate that, Arthur.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks so much for the opportunity to share with you. And I hope that it's been hopefully beneficial to somebody who's going to listen to this in the future.
Yeah, absolutely.
And, yeah.
Yeah.
So
Great.
thank you so much.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you, Stan.